At the New Year's Eve party held at my in-laws, my sister-in-law Jessica and I were each tasked with bringing our own dishes. While out shopping near my in-laws, I came across Brian and Jessica walking arm in arm. Unaware of my presence, Brian and Jessica were chatting away merrily. Serious Eugene would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. It's the thrill of sneaking around that's just so exciting. When can you stay over next? Come over tomorrow. With a burst of vulgar laughter, Brian and Jessica disappeared into the crowd. Back at the in-laws, Jessica and I were busy in the kitchen and the living room. Brian, who arrived late, immediately turned pale after sampling the food. He snatched the box from my hands and dumped everything into the outside trash bin. Don't serve lousy food to the relatives. I retorted to Brian's yelling. I didn't make any of it, you know? What? I smirked inwardly. Now, how shall I expose them in front of the family? I'm Hope, a 50-year-old housewife. 25 years ago, I married Brian after being introduced by an acquaintance. The following year, we had our son Alex. Brian is a sales manager at a large corporation, earning well above the average salary. Brian's parents have always treated me like their own daughter, making me immune to mother-in-law conflicts. Alex graduated from a well-known university and got a job at a multinational company. He started living on his own when he got the job and visits us on long weekends. To outsiders, our marriage might seem perfectly happy. But in reality, it was suffocating under Brian's domineering presence, with Alex and I always wary of his mood. Before we got married, Brian readily agreed when I said I wanted to keep working. Moreover, he even volunteered to share the household chores. We can live on my salary alone, but I want to start saving for education expenses early. It would really help if Hope could work. Since I'll be home late on weekdays, I can take care of weekend chores. However, once we were married, the situation completely reversed. Whether he came home on time or worked late, Brian would spend his evenings lying on the sofa, playing with his phone. Far from helping with the chores, he wouldn't even bother to take his used cup to the sink. And on weekends, it was more of the same, either on his phone or computer or laughing uproariously in front of the TV. Since my job required me to work on either Saturday or Sunday, I would leave young Alex in Brian's care on my days off, with his agreement. Of course. Despite this arrangement, Brian complained every time. One day, fed up, I voiced my complaints, and Brian yelled at me. You're like a demon. Dumping the kid on me and demanding housework on my only days off. All I asked was for you to bring in the laundry if it rained. And aren't you Alex's father? I said, nearly in tears, but it seemed to have no effect on Brian. He scowled as if I were a nuisance. Childcare is the mother's job. Every family does it, so stop your whining. You should be grateful and show respect that the head of the household is even helping with child rearing. When he was tired and in a bad mood, he would make me sit and list every fault in my housekeeping. Can't you cook anything better? Don't use the kid as an excuse. A housewife who can't cook decent meals is a failure. Don't skimp on meals. Besides the main dish, prepare at least 3 other dishes. Every household does it, why can't you? You're a disgrace as a housewife. You'd probably mess up the finances, so I'll manage them. Hand over your earnings for savings. $100 a month should be enough for your allowance. Eventually, when Alex ran up to him, Brian would visibly grimace and escape to his study. Daddy. I'm busy. Go play with mommy. He'd shoo Alex towards me, busy with meal preparations. Even when I leave Alex with Brian on weekday evenings, he might help with meals and changing clothes, but he just sets Alex up with children's videos or TV. Never really engaging with him. Just play with him a little. I've been working until just now. Unlike a housewife who has all the time in the world, I'm busy. Let me rest at home. Do I look idle to you? Maybe you should get your eyes checked. At that, Brian's face would turn red with anger, and he'd shout at me furiously. Since when did you become so bold to talk back to me? This is my house. If you have complaints, leave. Take him and go, right now. Knowing I had nowhere else to go, Brian's words were especially painful. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but that would require money, which Brian controlled. Even if I wanted to save secretly, it was impossible on a part-time salary. I went too far. I'm sorry, I said eventually. As long as you understand. When you earn more than me, then I'll listen to what you have to say. My affection for Brian had long since faded, but the thought of taking Alex away from his father also made me pause. Above all, Brian's parents are wonderful people, and Alex adores his grandparents. In front of his parents, Brian was always kind to us. He played the role of a good father in front of others. When we were dating, Brian was incredibly kind. He never bragged about his knowledge or looked down on others. He seemed like a genuinely nice person. However, not long after we got married, Brian began to belittle me for my education. "Ah, you probably don't know this," he'd say. "You can do this kind of calculation easily, right? Why don't you understand? With your education, maybe this topic is too much for you?" At first, he'd mock me gently, with a half-smile. But as Alex grew older, Brian began to insist on an elite path for him. If he's my son, he should be able to get into the top public high school in the county. It's free and close by. We'll save on educational costs. It's convenient to have a school nearby. But maybe he'll find a school he likes better when he gets to middle school. I won't allow anywhere but there. It's a waste of money on tuition fees. I was astounded. Is this the attitude of someone with a high income? Shall we get a tutor then? Or send him to a cram school? Neither is necessary. Just by attending classes, getting 100% is easy. I couldn't believe my ears. If you're worried, you can teach him. You're home by the evening, so you have time. I've forgotten middle school studies. The methods are different now. And when I get home, I'm swamped with housework. It's impossible. I was irked by the insinuation that I had free time. Even with an older child, there's plenty of work beyond housework, like overseeing homework and checking the next day's school requirements. Then Brian smirked. Teaching must be beyond someone like you. It's unfortunate for Alex to have a mother with such limitations. His continued provocations were stunning. By the way, since you promised to manage the household, when are you going to quit your job? What? The house has been a mess lately, I can't relax at home. Why don't you quit your job and focus on Alex's education? Prioritize your family over making pocket money. I stared at him, aghast. The mess was his doing. After coming home from work, he'd leave shirts and socks scattered around the living room. Dirty dishes remained on the table. Books taken from the study were left on the dining table and sofa, forgotten. It's not about pocket money, I'm saving for Alex's college and our retirement. We discussed this when I restarted work. I swallowed the words, "You're the one making the mess," and just stated the fact, to which Brian sneered. Don't get ahead of yourself thinking the company needs you. Unlike me, you're just a disposable part-timer. Right, I conceded. Anyway, make sure he goes to the same university as me. I won't accept anything less, Brian declared in a frustrating manner. I was irritated by his tone but refrained from arguing. Arguing back would only risk him being stingy about the college fund. Later, when Alex managed to get into a selective school on his own, Brian started bragging as if it was his own achievement. Yes, it's a school that sends students to prestigious universities every year. Being my son, he's naturally smart. Without saying congratulations, or you worked hard to Alex, Brian just boasted to everyone with a smile, leaving me feeling disgusted. One day, I'll divorce this man. Yet, fears about finances and living arrangements kept me from taking any action as time passed. Eventually, after graduating from university, Alex started his career and began living on his own. Lately, my conversations with Brian have significantly diminished. This is because his weekend work and overtime suddenly increased about half a year ago. Our household finances are managed by Brian. I don't mind if he increases his allowance with the extra earnings. However, recently, a large sum was withdrawn from my credit card without my knowledge. Upon investigation, I discovered a high-brand bag had been purchased at some point. When I asked Brian, he responded with a scowl. My card was maxed out, so I borrowed yours. We're family, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? It shouldn't be a problem. It's a $2,000 brand bag. Who did you give it to? It was a birthday present for my niece. I felt suspicious. Brian's brother, Eugene, has a daughter with his ex-wife. Brian has always doted on her since she was little. But would he really give such an expensive gift to a college student? Brian started coming home wearing perfume, and when I pressed him, he mentioned his niece again. I went out to eat with her. She's been busy with her part-time job and couldn't visit grandma over the holidays, so I wanted to treat her. She seemed lonely with my brother being overseas. Something felt off, but since I wasn't close to the niece, I hesitated to ask her directly. With these unresolved feelings, the seasons changed to winter. Eventually, after Christmas, Brian received a call from his mother. "What, you hurt your back?" Brian pressed the speakerphone button so I could hear the conversation. "It's just a little twist. Dad's here, and it's nothing serious, so don't worry. But it seems I won't be able to stand in the kitchen for the holidays. Should we just order food from a restaurant?" Hearing his mother's concern, Brian quickly suggested. "Don't worry. I'll have Hope make it." "What?" I thought, annoyed by his casual statement. After all, the extended family gathers at the in-laws for the holiday celebration. There will be food for 20 people. It's a lot of work for so many people. It's one thing if you and I work on it together like usual. Then Jessica and Hope can make it and bring it over. 10 portions each should be easy. Jessica is Eugene's wife. Eugene remarried a woman a decade younger this spring, but he won't be back until after the holidays due to overseas work commitments. I glared at Brian's back as he made the suggestion so lightly. I don't want to hear it from someone who can't even make a simple meal. "Hope, Brian says this, but can I ask you to do it?" "Well, yes. It's fine. Thank you so much for the trouble. I really appreciate it. Just take your time and rest, Mom." Brian, all smiles as he ended the call, then turned to me. "Hey. Don't be a burden to Jessica, understand?" Despite him not lifting a finger to help, he had the nerve to act superior. I was inwardly furious but asked without showing my irritation. "You're going to help with the holiday preparations too, right? You're off work, and you don't have any plans." Brian suddenly became evasive. "Well, actually, I have to work on a holiday. Again? Hasn't it been happening a lot lately? The company is officially off, but there was a mistake made by one of my subordinates in a deal. I have to apologize to the client. It's always me who has to clean up these messes, it's troubling." Brian laughed it off, scratching his head. Not being familiar with the workings of a large company from my experience in a small office job, I tilted my head, wondering if that's just how it is. However, when I mentioned this to Alex, he looked puzzled. Going to the office with a subordinate when work officially ends on the 28th? That's strange. That does seem odd. But the thought of starting a fight during the busy end of the year was too much hassle, so I decided not to delve further into it. Finally, New Year's Eve arrived. As promised to my mother-in-law, I prepared the holiday dishes and headed to the in-laws. I busied myself helping my father-in-law prepare for the arrival of many relatives, setting up large tables and cushions in the living room, and laying out tableware for 20 people. I was wondering when Jessica would arrive when a message came through on the family group chat. "Hope, Jessica will be a bit late." "Understood." "Oh, we've run out of whiskey. Shall I go buy some?" "Could you?" "That would be great. We have wine and beer, so take your time." "All right, I'll be off then." After greeting the relatives who had started to gather, I left my in-laws' house. There's a discount liquor store in the nearby bustling downtown area, so I decided to walk there instead of driving. As I walked through the crowded arcade, a familiar scent of perfume wafted towards me. Looking up, I saw Brian walking towards me, arm in arm with a woman, chatting and laughing. Completely engrossed in their conversation, Brian, wearing his hat low, didn't notice me at all. I stole a glance at the woman's face and was shocked. It was Jessica, of all people. Hope is such an idiot, coming from a lower-ranked university. It's so frustrating. Brian complained with a disgusted look. His loud voice echoed through the busy street. But Alex did so well, graduating from such prestigious high school and university. That's amazing. He really worked hard. Jessica responded in a cooing voice. He's my son, after all. It's natural. But it's embarrassing having such an uneducated wife. She doesn't know how to support her husband. And with no parents, her upbringing is poor too. I was furious. I couldn't stand being looked down upon by someone who always belittles others. So, Brian, why did you marry her then? I thought she'd be the type to obediently follow me. I wanted to outdo my brother since he only has one daughter, to produce an heir and show him. For such a reason. I was dumbfounded. Brian, your rivalry with Eugene is so obvious. Jessica giggled as they walked past me. I had stopped in my tracks without realizing it and stood to the side of the walkway, eavesdropping on their conversation so as not to block the passers-by. Jessica and Brian stopped on the other side of a vending machine, continuing their conversation while buying drinks. Eugene, being so serious, would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. The thrill of sneaking around is just irresistible. When can you stay over next? Come over tomorrow. I'll be there. My wife believes anything if I say it's work-related. It's convenient she's so naive. Brian chuckled crudely, and they disappeared into the crowd. I trembled with rage. My suspicions were confirmed, they were indeed having an affair. And with his brother's wife, no less. They must have been mocking Eugene and me all along. Unforgivable. Just wait and see. I'll give them the most unforgettable holiday evening. Before returning to my in-laws, I had a stop to make, so I informed my mother-in-law and took a detour. When I arrived at my in-laws, Jessica was already there, preparing drinks and snacks in the kitchen with Brian's cousins and their children. Where's Brian? He's not here yet. Should be arriving soon, I guess? Right. It would be odd for them to arrive together, so they must have planned to visit separately. All the relatives had already arrived. The older men seated at the large table were flushed from drinking, loudly chatting and watching TV. I approached Jessica with a proposal. The thing is, that's fine with me. It might have been a mistake, but this could be a good chance to showcase my cooking to everyone. Can I transfer it into this decorative box? It's a shame to present such lovely dishes in plain containers. Yay! Thank you so much. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had injured her back, was serving drinks to the relatives in the living room. After a while, Brian finally arrived. He was in a suit, carrying a laptop case. Work caught up with me even at the end of the year. Hard work being a salaried man, huh? After washing his hands, Brian joined the circle of relatives and started drinking. Hope, thank you. Could we start bringing out the food? Let's all eat together. My mother-in-law opened the door to the living room and called out to the kitchen. All right, coming. I prepared small plates and forks for the food, waiting for Brian's cousins and Jessica to return to the kitchen. Jessica was chatting with the relatives while carrying snacks. With food for 20 people, it needed to be carried in several trips. As I was deciding which decorative box to carry first, decorated with elegant patterns, Brian suddenly appeared. Oh, Brian, you're helping too? With this much, it's going to be tough to carry everything. Brian, already flushed from drinking, didn't respond but opened the lid of a decorative box. Using his fork, he started picking at the dishes. Hey, that's rude. Brian exaggeratedly grimaced, then inexplicably opened the back door, took the decorative box outside. What's going on? Peering through the back door, I was speechless. Brian was dumping the contents of the decorative box into the trash can. As Brian made several trips between the trash can and the kitchen, he finally tossed the empty decorative box into the kitchen sink and yelled at me. Don't serve lousy food to the relatives. My eyes blinked in disbelief. I didn't make any of it, I retorted. What? It was all made by Jessica. Brian looked dumbfounded for a moment but quickly turned on me. Don't lie. That's our decorative box. I know you made it. Well, what was that taste? Even pig slop is better. If you serve such terrible food, it's me and Mom who are embarrassed. You can't even make proper holiday dishes? What kind of wife, no, what kind of woman are you? Brian ranted furiously, but I calmly informed him. Your taste in food is seriously questionable. Jessica's dishes were delicious. Haven't you ever eaten her cooking? Well, we always eat out. Jessica didn't bring her own containers, so she used what was available. That's why I lent her ours. Brian's eyes widened. She was supposed to make half, but she accidentally prepared enough for 20. So, I gave her portion to Alex, told him to enjoy it with his friends. I explained carefully. Jessica wanted to show off her cooking skills to everyone, so I thought it was a good opportunity. You should have told me sooner. I smirked inwardly. Knowing Brian, who always criticizes my cooking, I anticipated he would complain if I switched the contents of the containers with Jessica's. I never imagined he'd throw it in the trash, though. Now, how shall I expose them in front of the relatives? This is going to be an interesting evening. Just then, Jessica arrived at the entrance, and I raised my voice. Can you believe it? Brian threw away all the dishes that Jessica made. The bottle of drink Jessica was holding dropped to the floor. Turning around at the sound, Brian's eyes widened as he saw Jessica's shocked expression. Brian, what do you mean by that? Jessica. Well. Brian fumbled for words. Tears started rolling down Jessica's cheeks. I ordered the ingredients directly from the producers, researched recipes, and spent an entire day making it. I was so excited to make delicious dishes for everyone to enjoy. And you threw it all away? Jessica's tearful plea made Brian scramble for an excuse. Sorry, I made a mistake. You know, I'm drunk. Don't use being drunk as an excuse. Didn't your parents teach you not to waste food when you were a child? Years of frustration exploded, and I snapped at Brian. You always act so superior to me and Alex, but when you're drunk, your true colors show. Brian started to speak but held back his complaints in front of Jessica. Probably because making a scene near the doorway to the room would carry the noise into the living room. But it was in vain. Sorry for serving dishes worse than pig slop. I'm just a failure as a woman, right? Jessica, sitting on the floor, burst into tears, and the relatives gathered around. What happened? What's going on? As I explained, my in-laws were appalled. My mother-in-law looked pityingly at the sobbing Jessica and sighed. I must have raised him wrong. I'm so sorry. My mother-in-law apologized to Jessica. The other relatives defended her and verbally attacked Brian in unison. Brian is 50, right? It's his responsibility. Brian, you need to take responsibility. You're not saying we have to celebrate the evening without dishes, are you? I stepped forward and appealed pitifully in front of Brian. I'm sorry. This happened because I switched the contents of the containers. Brian is actually very kind. Let me show you the proof right now. I took out my phone and pressed the play button on a recording. Brian was startled by the audio that played. Hope is such an idiot, coming from a lower-ranked university. It's so annoying. It was the conversation between Brian and Jessica that I had recorded earlier in the downtown area when I spotted them. Although there was background noise, their voices were clearly audible. Stop it. I mean, please stop. I'm begging you. Brian glared at me threateningly, but I ignored him and continued to play the audio. Eugene, being so serious, would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. The thrill of sneaking around is just irresistible. Can I come over to stay again? Come over tomorrow. The conversation between the two echoed into the living room through the open doors. The room fell silent at the shocking conversation, and all the relatives turned their attention to Brian and Jessica. You two, taking advantage of Eugene being overseas to have an affair? This is... Brian stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. You know, it's dangerous for a woman to live alone with my brother away. I was just checking on her from time to time because I was worried. My brother even asked me to look after Jessica. It's true. We're just good friends. Their flimsy excuses made me burst out laughing. Did they really think anyone would believe that? Jessica, you clearly said it was an affair. Oh, come on, it was just a joke. Hope, do you have any proof of us having an affair? Jessica smirked, and I felt a surge of anger. Just their conversation wasn't enough. I needed irrefutable proof. So, I showed Jessica the image on my phone. It was the receipt for the brand bag Brian bought with my card. Jessica, Brian gave you a branded gift, didn't he? You've received more than just this, right? I couldn't believe the frugal Brian would buy such expensive gifts for his brother's wife. Then Jessica smirked. Right. As friends, he gave me a birthday present. Have you never received a present from Brian, even though you're his wife? Wow. That's miserable. She laughed, shaking her shoulders. He's bought me lots of other things too. Brian will buy me anything if I ask. Right? Jessica looked up at Brian with a coquettish voice. Despite insisting they weren't having an affair, she seemed to be trying to assert dominance over me. However, Brian frowned and replied curtly. Huh? I plan to have everything returned later. What? Jessica was taken aback. I never said they were gifts. You said you wanted them, so I bought them. There's no way I'd use my hard-earned salary on someone else. Right. You even skimped on Alex's tuition fees. Jessica was dumbfounded as I nodded in agreement. What's that supposed to mean? You didn't say you'd pay back later? Jessica looked confused. That had to be a joke. No, I'm serious. Brian said with a straight face. I don't want to spend money on anyone but myself. Make sure to pay back half of everything, including the hotel stays we've shared. Giving Jessica anything for free doesn't benefit me at all. It must be around $30,000 in total, right? Jessica's face turned bright red. She lashed out in anger. Don't joke around. Why were you having an affair with me if that's how you feel? It's strange to hate spending money on a woman you like. It was to annoy my brother. Brian coldly retorted. It was fun secretly taking what belonged to my brother. You were somewhat my type, and when you came on to me, I thought I was lucky. Brian smirked. Anyway, make sure to pay back all the money spent. It's all noted in the household account book. You must be getting more than enough living expenses from my brother, right? Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes as she became rigid. That's terrible. I had an affair with Brian because I liked him. I never thought he was this kind of person. Screaming, Jessica grabbed her coat and bag. That's it, let's break up. I never want to see your face again. Fine, but make sure to pay back all the money. Like I'd pay back, idiot. A seriously boring husband is 100 times better than you. As Jessica stormed out, watched by the relatives, she bumped into someone in the hallway and fell. Grasping the offered hand, she gasped as she stood up. Eugene. I'm back. It's lively this year too. Eugene, with a breezy smile, slowly surveyed Brian and the relatives with a look of disgust. You were talking about me, right? Go on. Bro, why'd you come back? I wanted to spend the holidays in America. Worked hard to finish everything and came back. Brian paled as Eugene smiled stiffly at him. It seems Jessica has been quite a help to you, Brian. As Eugene shifted his gaze between Brian and Jessica, she suddenly clung to him, pleading in a sweet voice. It's not my fault. He pressured me into it, I was reluctant. I didn't betray Eugene because I wanted to. Please believe me. Who was it that always complained about a husband who only thinks about work, has the worst taste in clothes, and only gives cheap gifts? I don't know anything about that. You must have made it all up. Eugene. He's harassing me like this because he can't compete with you in work or studies. I respect and love Eugene. You're not going to say we should divorce, right? Tears in her eyes, Jessica clung to Eugene as Brian, and the relatives watched in disbelief. Thanks to Eugene's income, Jessica lived a luxurious life and wouldn't want to lose that by getting divorced. In her attempt to protect herself, Jessica hurriedly tried to make excuses. Eugene, smiling at Jessica, took out his phone. As soon as the holidays are over. I was planning, but maybe now is good too. As Eugene scrolled through his phone, pictures of Brian and Jessica looking cozy appeared on the screen. They were snuggled up together, entering a hotel. Waiting at a traffic light, gazing at each other dreamily. A scene of them kissing as they got out of a car. Such images kept coming one after another. Eugene, when did you? When I came back to America the other day, I had a detective agency follow her. I wanted them to tail my wife as soon as I left America. Eugene explained casually. Every time I come back, there are more brand bags and accessories in the closet, but no purchase history on the family card. Naturally, I suspected an affair. Eugene shrugged, looking at Brian with cold eyes. But I didn't expect the other man to be my own brother. The usually gentle Eugene's tone was filled with fierce anger, silencing the room. There's more. Want to hear the conversations we recorded through the hotel room door? No. That's enough. Jessica replied in a barely audible voice. So, you'll agree to the divorce? Yes. Jessica slumped, and Brian, surprisingly, remained composed. Poor brother. The first wife said it was a mismatch, and the second one cheated. And his daughter's college is lower ranked. Brian sneered at Eugene. Compared to that, I produced an heir, and my son landed a job at a top company. Plus, my marriage is harmonious. I've won in life, brother. Are you an idiot? I couldn't help but express my disdain. Brian blinked in surprise as I half laughed. Of course, you're getting a divorce. And your son's education and job are his achievements, not yours. Of course. The relatives nodded deeply. Divorce? Over a single affair? Don't make a fuss. I won't accept it. Brian was met with disbelief, and the in-laws spoke up. Brian, you don't need to come to the gatherings from next year. Why? Because we're distancing ourselves from you. What? Distance from the son who produced an heir? You're joking. Brian smirked, but his face fell at the serious expressions of his in-laws. And so, the holiday at the in-laws' house was greeted with a somber atmosphere. For Brian and Jessica, it must have been a hell of an evening. Listening to the holiday celebrations, Jessica signed the divorce papers Eugene had prepared and left the in-laws' house. After apologizing to the relatives for the commotion, I returned home. As I was leaving, my in-laws both apologized to me. After the holidays, I sent Brian the signed divorce papers. I took the apartment we had been living in, and Brian moved to a different apartment. After some resistance, Brian and Jessica reluctantly agreed to pay alimony, as demanded through a lawyer. Given Brian's high income, a substantial alimony wouldn't hurt him, or so I thought. Later, Eugene shared an unexpected story. Brian had been dabbling in investments without my knowledge. With almost no savings left, he had to borrow money to pay the alimony. Overconfident in his own intelligence and without proper study, he had invested heavily and suffered significant losses. To cover his losses, Brian ventured into other investments, leading to an even greater debt. It seems that was also a reason behind his stinginess with Alex's education funds. Moreover, after confiding in a close colleague about the reasons for his divorce, the news quickly spread to other colleagues and became known throughout the company. Feeling uncomfortable, Brian left his job and started working part-time to repay his debts. But he became distrustful of others and now spends his time secluded in his room, aside from work. Jessica, who had lived lavishly on Eugene's money, had no savings to pay the alimony to me and ended up pleading with her parents. Furious, her parents paid the alimony on her behalf and got her a job in a company owned by an acquaintance. Now, she is closely monitored in her personal life by the acquaintance and is made to work hard from morning till night. After the divorce, I live freely in a spacious apartment. With no one to nag about being perfect at housekeeping, I took the full-time employee conversion exam and started working as a full-time employee. I no longer have to endure snide remarks and can spend my money freely. It's a very refreshing feeling. In forward spirits, I plan to watch over Alex and spend the rest of my life meaningfully.